Welcome to Building Fortunes Radio. Make sure you check us out at buildingfortunesradio.com. Along with our marketing partners, we're here to help our PM Marketing Network Leads customers build their businesses and make the world a better place. At Building Fortunes, we know how much your business means to you and the people important to you. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world. Now on to our show with your host, Peter Mingils.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingils here. You're listening to Building Fortunes Radio on www.buildingfortunesradio.com. Now, we post our radio shows all over the Internet, so if you find us somewhere else, you can find us on www.buildingfortunesradio.com. You can also find us all over the place. We have friends on Break Free Radio. We have friends on Amazing Women of Power. We have a lot of people that ask us for our radio shows, and they wind up broadcasting us all over the place. So if you find us all over the place, that's because we might be all over the place. About 3 years ago, almost to the day, I started Building Fortunes Radio. It was a thought and a mindset that I think we want to do some stuff so we can get our voice and our customers' voices and the voices of positive people, critics, everybody on the planet that wanted to speak up about the benefits or the disadvantages of home-based businesses to level the playing field so they could effectively, if they chose to, build a fortune by doing something related to this industry. So whether you're an attorney or whether you're a consultant or whether you're a distributor or whether you're a vendor or whatever you're wherever, you'd be able to actually become successful building a home-based business and, in part, be able to share your interesting stories on Building Fortunes Radio. So my job is to create the environment or the platform for that to happen. So during the week we have lots of radio shows, and I can't single out anyone in particular, so just kind of throw out some examples. We have Chris Molinari that does Cancer, A Warrior's Journey. She's a cancer survivor. She also does Power Players Talks. She brings some really cool people on. We have people like, Billy Osmond, who is just like going straight to heaven. Billy is a gal that runs a home-based business, but she also runs a ministry with Castell Roll, and we do radio shows with them on Thursday. We have Irving and Dr. Jacqueline Harris, one of our oldest customers, not older by time, but older since kind of like a long time ago, and they're building a really cool home-based business, and they educate people on environmentally, ecologically free products or great products. We have people like, Dr. Jerry Brown, a man whose story is just amazing. I mean, and I'm not mentioning all of them, but we have recently we've had some of the MLM, for lack of a better word, critics. Robert Smith, who wrote a book called Downline, Roger Van Blissingen, who we'll talk a little bit about as well on this radio show. They do a separate spot for us on Fridays. So we do a whole bunch of really cool things. The gentleman I want to introduce you today is just as great as an example of somebody that I think has a great awareness of what's happening in the MLM industry, and also is very adamant about identifying the niche that he fills more so than anybody else that I know in the industry, and that's the concept of tools, and sometimes how tools, like books, tapes, functions, things like that, websites, are sometimes used as a disguise to lure people in, but really it's a big front, meaning a lot of people are making more money on the tools than they are on the opportunities that they're promoting. So there's a level of deception there. Somebody might be thinking, I'm going to be rich and famous just like them. I'll have that lifestyle by joining. I'll use Amway as an example because it's a good example to use because that's the one that he uses when we talk about his website. So I'm going to be rich and famous by working with Amway because I'm going to do just like that guy on stage whose books I'm buying and tapes I'm buying and functions I'm going to and this that I'm buying from him and I'm buying from him and I'm buying from him and I'm buying from him, but how come I'm not making any money in Amway? So there's this, if you will, the illusion of tons of money being made, but the deception of the tools being the scam. So he actually has a website called StopTheAmwayToolScam.com. So StopTheAmwayToolScam.wordpress.com. StopTheAmwayToolScam.wordpress.com. And if you go there, you'll hear a whole bunch of, or see a whole bunch of really cool things relative to not only this industry, but also his Amway situation. Now, I'm not going to suggest that everybody in Amway is doing something wrong. I'm just going to suggest that, in essence, if you are working Amway or companies like Amway or in the MLM business, you have to realize there might be some predators out there that are making more money on tools, not necessarily giving you that disclosure, and therefore providing a false sense of the opportunity, so you're running down the wrong track. If they were a magician, they would be masters of deception. So we don't like that. I think that's totally unfair, and a lot of people get hurt. So if you are listening to Building Fortunes Radio, we talk about these types of things openly and honestly. So this way you can play the game better, if we call it a game. You can build a business stronger, and you won't get sucked into the things that goofy people or innocent people or naive people get sucked into. So I want to introduce Scott Johnson, who runs the website stoptheamwaytoolscam.wordpress.com, and he joins us on Saturday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We kind of talk about some stuff that's going on in the industry for about an hour. So welcome for being here. And Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how stoptheamwaytoolscam.wordpress.com got started, and then we'll jump into this week's topics.
Hey, Peter. Good evening again. It's great to be back with you. I was just thinking this week, we've been on this program several times, how similar our experiences were when I look at it from a particular perspective, because you've talked about how you joined and quit Amway 3 different times. Now, I only joined one time, and I got terminated one time, and I've never been back. But in between, I had different life experiences which interrupted my business. Little things like back surgery, pancreatitis surgery, moving, getting laid off, those kinds of things. But just like you, when you got out of Amway and got back in, I was in a similar situation. I never formally quit. I just went inactive until the situation changed a little bit, and I got going again. So I just kind of was thinking about that last week. And, my website I put together, basically it goes through a lot of information and a lot of research that I've done, because when I make a statement, I don't like to just make a statement and not be able to back it up. And so that's what my website does. And in fact, when you talked earlier about, certain Amway people making a lot of money, I actually have a section in my website. If you go to it, it's in section I, as in India, and it's entitled, Find Out If Your Upline Was Scamming/Will Scam You. Since I can't direct this towards current IBOs, I had to put those past tense and future tense in the website. And so if you go to that section, you'll see the prices that are typical in Amway for different things, for various meetings, for the books, for the CDs, for the website access, for the voicemail, all those things. And since most of those tools is almost all profit, there's not much that goes into the cost of putting them together, unless you're paying significantly less, and I'm talking about at least 3/4 less than those prices. You can be pretty sure your upline is also raking in several times more from tools than they are from the Amway business. And I imagine you can probably even use those prices, at least in a rough measure, for other MLMs. And so it's just kind of a guide for people to, have some sort of a framework to help them understand and determine whether or not their upline is scamming them on tools, purely based on the price of those tools. And of course, that assumes several things. It assumes a similar percentage of people are buying the tools. It assumes the tools are being produced for similar costs. And so there are some assumptions behind it, and therefore it's not exact. But again, because most of the tool is pure profit, you don't have to worry too much about production costs. And my experience has been most of the groups, they're pretty consistent as far as the percentage of people that buy the tools versus don't buy the tools. So I do think, it's a pretty good guidepost as far as what's going on with tool profits for your upline.
And when you're saying tool profits, like for instance, when I was, my specific example with Amway, is I was in direct sales at the time. I knocked on a woman's door. This is my first experience with Amway. I knocked on a woman's door. She said, I could never buy your product. I was training a college student at the time, and I had a vacuum. And I said, you can never buy my product. What does that mean? And she said, I'd have to buy it from my husband's company. And she led me to believe, by default or by pure deception, that her husband had a company that made vacuums. So it might have been my misbelief or my disbelief or my prejudice to think that I was running across a vacuum cleaner manufacturer. So when she said, would you like to talk to him? I said, of course, because why wouldn't I want to speak to a vacuum cleaner manufacturer who, by coincidence, I knocked on his door. So I thought, oh, sure, I'll come back and I'll talk to him. She said he'd love to speak to you. So when I went back, that's when I found out that they didn't tell me anything about vacuums. They told me about an international company. They told me about billions of dollars. They told me about worldwide distribution, and there was this lot of fluffy stuff, like lots of fluffy stuff. It was blown up in a balloon. If I popped it, I wanted to wind up in another state. And then finally, when I asked, what is this, they said Amway. I didn't really know anything about Amway, although I heard the word. And I said, well, sure. I mean, I'll check it out. They're the grandfather, if you will, the granddaddy, the grand poobah, one of the biggest network marketing companies. At that time, they were the biggest network marketing company. Who else to learn network marketing from than from them? And one of the first things that I did was I bought some product because I wanted to try it. I was okay with that. How in the world could you sell something unless you bought it first, I thought. Then they said, well, you got to be on these tapes. I said, I got tons of tapes. Are they product tapes? Sure. So I bought some tapes. And I was hoping that they hear about laundry detergent, why theirs is better than somebody else's, and carpet shampoo, and why their dog spray was better than anybody else's. And I heard about lifestyle of the rich and famous. And I was broke. It sounded like a country music record. I was broke and now I'm rich. I was broke and now I'm rich. Oh my God! Felt like crying. Felt like really emotional. I was like, well, okay, that's cool. Can I have one about product? Because I don't need to be wound up every day. These are wonderful stories, I thought. And then it was a tape of the week, $10 for the tape of the week. So I'd come back and $10, and you're probably going to recruit some people, aren't you, Peter? Sure. You're going to need some tapes for them, so buy 4 or 5 of those things. So I'm like, $50 for 5 tapes. Now remember, I came from direct sales, so I knew the value of education. I knew the value of tapes. I knew the going rate of those things. So Scott, I'm like, $50 for 5 tapes, and what do I have to do? I give them away, or I'm probably going to just give them away. That's $50. That's $50 for. I'd rather be buying $50 in product than $50 in tapes. And that went
That's
on.
probably a few years ago too, wasn't it?
Was it? Yeah, it was. That was in the 1980s.
Yeah.
That was in the 1980s, and
right.
And every time I went back, I bought my 5 tapes because I wanted to be a loyal soldier. And you're going to sell these, aren't you, Peter? I don't know if I'm going to sell them. I'm going to give them to people I'm recruiting. And they would just, they were lifestyle tapes, and they weren't really knowledge tapes. And I said, I just don't feel right with this stuff. Can I do it without the tapes? And boy, did you get like a nasty look. And, so I cashed. I never even cashed my check for $6 because I felt bad because they actually had to physically write it. So I'm like, I'm not even going to cash this check for $6. So I never even cashed my first Amway check. And because I felt bad. I'm like, well, they probably need it more than I do. So I just left it alone. And I got disillusioned because it was books, tapes, functions. Books, tapes, functions. I don't need books. I need tapes. I need functions. Now, you got to remember, I realized I was in direct sales. I was a leader of a direct sales company. I was interested in getting out because I wasn't really crazy about that direct sales company. I was interested in learning a profession, got hoodwinked into joining Amway because I thought I was visiting with a manufacturer of a vacuum cleaner company. So it started with deception, kept going with deception. I just said, that's it, I'm done. That was my first time in Amway, and I can kind of repeat the same story 3 times. So every time I'm like, nope, don't want to do it. It's Amway. Already know the gig. You guys don't make any money on the product. You make most of your money on tools. I get it. I get it, but I'm not that. I don't want to do that to other people, and that was my thought process. And I said, I could be wrong, but please show me that I'm right. Or please show me that I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong. I wish this was the answer to some of the people's prayers because not everybody's ever going to be able to do what I do, selling vacuums. I figured it would be a good thing for me to help customers make some extra money so they could buy my vacuum cleaner. So I quit and joined 3 times only because I couldn't get away from the tool scam. Now, I got to tell you sincerely, I don't know if that's the way Amway is. So I don't know if that's the way Amway is across the board. But I will tell you that all of my 3 exposures and every other exposure that I've ever been exposed to, a lot of people are making money on the tools. And not many people that I know were ever making too much money on the sales of the products or services. And yet still, now think about this, Scott, they're a multi-billion-dollar company. I bet you they are a multi-billion-dollar company that never gets run through Amway's books. So if Amway is $5 billion, the amount of other money that's running through it is $20 billion. Easy. Who knows where it goes? In people's pockets. Who knows where it goes? In tapes and books and whatever. But I'm telling you, they're probably 5 times the amount off the books than on the books in Amway. I don't know if I'm speaking out of terms, and they probably can sue me for some of the things that I say because those are my opinions, and those are my experiences, and they're loose math in all of my examples here, but the reality is I bet you there's more business off the books than on the books in Amway.
Yeah, I actually have an estimate on my website on how much is made from tools, because they do put out figures like since the beginning of Amway in 1959, depending on whose presentation you're looking at, it's anywhere between 40 to 50 billion, that's with a B as in boy, dollars in Amway bonuses have been paid out. And then I just make some assumptions based on the way that the pay plan works and how much money the upline makes. But you're right, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of, if it's 50 billion overall for the total of Amway bonuses since the beginning of the company, then it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 100 to 200 billion in the tool scam profits.
Yep. And I have no problem with that if there were full disclosure. I have no problem with that at all. But because most people don't know it.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and what's interesting too about your experience was if in the 1980s you were paying $10 per cassette tape, I was paying, I believe in 1993 when I first started, $5 per tape, and then it went up to $6, and then when they introduced CDs, it was $7, and I've seen more recently somewhere between $7 and $10 per CD, depending on the line of sponsorship.
Wow.
So your tapes were pretty expensive for the 80s,
right.
You know, compared to my experience and the experience of most people that I've come across.
But I got to tell you, my upline drove really nice cars. They lived in a really nice house. They had a lifestyle.
Yep, that was that's what I now call a tape house and a meeting book. I mean, right. a meeting vehicle.
Right, there you go. So
exactly.
Anyway, so we talked a little bit. So we talked about the tool scam. You have stoptheamwaytoolscam.wordpress.com. So for those people that want to learn those types of things, we kind of laid the groundwork for those people that might be new and never heard you before. That's where you came up with the niche of the tool scam, and it's probably more prevalent, although maybe not as exaggerated as it seems like the Amway guys are. However, if your upline or someone's upline happens to have fallen from the Amway tree, chances are it's been probably duplicated in the company that you might be working with. So you got to just watch out. Because a lot of the Amway people have split Amway and they are joining other companies. And if you find out a little bit about their background, you might find that, you know, somewhere along the line the sperm and the egg of their MLM experience came from Amway, and they're just kind of duplicating the same thing over wherever they fell. So let's talk about anything else you want to talk about, Scott. If you want to keep going with the tool stuff, you can. Otherwise, let's jump into some of the topics this week.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of go through the news that I put on my website this past week, and anybody can look at the details on this. I'll just kind of give an overview. And this is in section D as in David. That's the news. And back on December 5th, I've got a little story in there from the Chicago Sun-Times, and the paragraph in my website, it says, "Wonder why politicians don't clamp down on MLM scams? Wonder no longer." And the next thing is this link to all these Chicago politicians who are in MLMs.
Really?
So if you're wondering, gee, how come they don't get their hands around this and stop it? Well, this is one of the reasons, is because they're in it.
So where? Say that again. Where is that?
That's on my website. It's section D as in David, and it's the story from December 5th, 2015. So if you just scroll down a little bit, a few days, you can. The link is right on there to the Chicago Sun-Times story. You can read it yourself, and you know it's all there. So I don't make stuff up. You know, I come up with these incredible stories, but I have references for all of them. I have sources for all of them, and I can't believe sometimes the stuff I find. It's almost like I don't have a big enough imagination to make this stuff up. You know.
Yeah, the truth is better than fiction sometimes, especially in this industry.
Yeah, it's almost more bizarre than, if you were on crack cocaine and just started hallucinating.
Right.
So, and then on December 7th, the news came out this week on the VEMA case. The settlement and trial schedule is out. I think there's some activity going on. If they do end up settling, that's not a decision yet, I don't believe, but it'll be sometime in next March time frame. And then there's also a schedule in there for discovery and, back and forth and trial, and that goes, I think, into 2017. Of course, all that's moot if they end up settling before then, but that's just another thing that's out there for people to look at. A couple things came out this week about Zeke Rewards, and one of them was Trudy Gilman, and there's just a link there for a story about what's happening with her. She's being gone after by the government, and that's a December 8th story. And then on the same day, did you want to comment on that? Because I know you know Zeke Rewards better than most.
I sure do. Yeah, I sure do. So the neat thing about the Zeke Rewards scenario, and I got to give you full disclosure. So I got to give you a little bit of the background for those people who are listening in. When I was the president of the ANMP, so Association of Network Marketing Professionals, previously it was called the Distributor Rights Association, we would have our national convention. And I had the obligation, of course, as the president to make sure that we had the place filled. So I would actively get involved in talking to people, and Zeke Rewards was hotter than a firecracker. And I had some of our customers that were always asking me about this, and I had some experience with Dawn Wright Oliveris and her fiancé at the time. His name is Alex DeBrance. So I called up Dawn, and I said, Dawn, there's a lot of things going on in your company. And she had asked me several times to join with her in one thing or another. And I would always say, Dawn, we just don't do deals. I just don't have time for it. I have to focus on my customers and all that sort of stuff. And she always politely said, okay, just wanted to check. And she was a real good person. I mean, I really I got to tell you, I literally like her. I think she's just great. Alex has a wonderful laugh, contagious. They're good people. So for all those people that paint them into whatever picture, that's just foolish. So anyway, so the reality was that I asked Dawn to, and she told me we're really doing some unbelievable things with compliance. And we have the money to be able to buy everything that we need. Right servers, right this. We're going to do everything right. We'll hire the best attorneys. We'll make sure that this is going to be lasting around forever. We hired Jerry Nera. We hired Spencer, Grimes and Reese, rather. We hired Keith Lagos. We're hiring this guy over here and that guy over there and all that sort of stuff. And they really went through a who's who of all the people that they had hired. And I said, they hired a gentleman named Greg Caldwell. And I didn't know who Greg was. So I said, he was the compliance guy, and we're doing this and doing this and doing this. I said, I'm really impressed. Matter of fact, I'm so impressed. If you want to, why don't you sponsor a breakfast? We could use the money to help support the environment, sponsor the breakfast, and I'll kind of show you around, like the different people you should probably talk to. Troy Dooley, Tom Chenault. Tom Chenault runs a radio show. Troy Dooley does his thing. So that's what I'm supposed to do as the president. I'm supposed to be like a tour guide, like the guest host, kind of introduce and make things work. That's what we do. We help people build a business. So she came over with Alex and I think one other person and Greg Caldwell. And got to tell you, I got to like Greg Caldwell as well. He was a private investigator, really stand-up guy, and Greg Caldwell is the canary in the coal mine. When you see him fall over or die or fly away, there's trouble. There's trouble. If a guy like Greg, who you would never be able to see, I'm not doing anything wrong for anybody, for any price, stays, then you realize, at least my opinion was, there's something right. So you have Jerry Nera, and I'm painting this story for the rest of this radio show as well. Jerry Nera, Kevin Grimes, great guy, absolutely wonderful man, does unbelievable things. Keith Lagos, who I have a huge level of respect for, because he's done the Moneymakers Monthly Network Marketing Business Journal. And you can't talk to Keith without having, him say, give me money, because he's going to do, that's what he does. He builds a business by saying, I'm going to write an advertorial for you, going to advertise in my magazine. Keith's a salesman, he knows how to ask people for money. So anytime you're dealing with Keith, you're going to have to write a check, and sometimes a pretty big check. He's a pitch man for the industry, and I love him for that as well because he moves a lot of stuff. So anyway, so all these things happen, and I got a chance to have a first-hand introduction with Dawn. Met her for the very first time there, even though we had spoken a couple of times before. She said to me, Peter, can you write a sales manual? I said, well, I could write a sales manual because that's what we do. We teach sales. But I don't know anything about penny auctions. I don't know anything about how to sell a bid. Matter of fact, I don't think anybody on the planet prior to this, because you're a new category, there was no such thing as penny auctions, said you are a category creator. I don't know how to sell a bid. I'd have to learn how to sell a bid. Anything that can be sold, and you really do have a very interesting story, and there's lots of profit in it if you do it the right way, so sure, but I'll have to listen to your conference calls. I got to understand the business that I'm going to be selling stuff in, so obviously I had a first-hand seat as kind of like a consultant. Now, by the way, a very largely underpaid consultant. I started off for X amount of money. It was not a lot. It started off $1,500 a month. Plus, we didn't have expenses because I wasn't doing anything except for that. I said, start me off at $1,500 a month, and if we do bigger things, we'll do more stuff. So start off there. So spend $1,000, get yourself to the A&P meeting, throw $1,500 in my hands because I'll take a look at what we're going to do and we're going to see where we're going to go further. Now, at that very same time, the government was coming off with a rule that companies couldn't get involved, and I'm using the wrong terms, but couldn't get involved with the procurement of customers and placing machines and all of that sort of stuff. I say placing machines. If you're a vending company, the company itself couldn't promise that we're going to place you into these locations without different levels of disclosure. So she said to me, Peter, we can't even endorse you being in the leads business. Even though you might be the sales trainer, we can't do that because we can't, as a company, endorse any of that sort of stuff. So here we find, by the way, is the only company that I know that actually followed the rules. So when she came to the event, I paraded her around in a polite way. Cheryl Gonzalez threw a fit. Lots of other people were threatened because Zeke Rewards was sucking their people in because it was the hottest thing since the firecracker. So a lot of people were pissed at me. And as a result of that, I'm no longer the president of the A&P. As a result of that and other things alongside with weaseling their way into being president and things along that line. But that's another conference call. So anyway, so we go through this whole entire thing, and I watched as things were going on, and I got to share with you, you said something about Trudy. Oh, so there's my disclosure. So my disclosure is I was part of the thing, never held a position as far as a distributor, always kept myself hands off, but was actively involved in helping with customer service conference calls. I visited the red carpet, shook Paul Burke's hand a couple of times. He actually bought me lunch a few times. He bought everybody lunch when we went to the Village Green. So it was kind of a neat man, and it's a tragic situation from my perspective. So if you've ever heard the idea that there's several sides of a story, wait until I get a chance to tell my side. And the only reason why my side's not being told even further is because there's still pending stuff that's going on, and I don't want to blemish any of my story yet in reference to those things because there's still a lot of things that are actively going on, including this week. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about Trudy. I met Trudy, a business partner of hers. They lived in Vermont. Sometimes I say New Hampshire. I make a mistake. I believe they live in Vermont. She's the hardest working, most loyal person, hardest working, goodest soul you'll ever find. The words scam and Trudy Gilman are so far apart of each other. So you would say, Peter, I'm listening to you on the radio show. How come all the things I read about Trudy as if she's like some horrible person who's this master schemer? I would say that's because you can't always believe everything you read. You got to put boots on the ground. You got to work with her. She's a hard-working person, and when she said she worked real hard, nobody was jumping into her business. She held meetings and conference calls, and 18 or 24 hours a day, she jumped on planes and she helped people. And she loved on them, and she worked with them, and she helped them out, everything. And the idea that Trudy Gilman is actually being hung out there to drive and painted as a scammer is an absolute shame. And I literally, because I'm the guy who puts boots on the ground, I literally could get violently pissed at anybody that would ever say anything about her otherwise. And unfortunately, she's out of her league in reference to dealing with a receiver who's got tons of resources to do plenty of things. She's also out of her league when she's dealing with attorneys, because one of her attorneys actually did a fantastic job and could have had this thing all handled if it wasn't for the judge who just decided that, nope, we're not going to do this for whatever reason. That's a twist that most people don't realize. And because of that, she is sitting in a predatory seat where she's literally, I don't know, I haven't spoken to her. I called her once. She hasn't called me back. I haven't really pushed her. She's either just like dismissed this whole thing mentally or freaking out one way or the other. And it's absolutely a positive shame that our government allows receivers like him to do the things that he is doing to Trudy Gilman. It is absolutely horrible. So behind MLM, Patrick Pretty, everybody else who runs Ponzi, anything, you really should be nice to Trudy Gilman. She's not who you think. She's not who you write about she is. So that's me sticking up for Trudy. So anyway, so having said that, I will gladly tell that story to anybody that wants to listen. Now, on the other hand, did she get wrapped up in whatever happened with Zeke? Paul Burks would say, I don't know how the heck this happened. Dawn is going to say, I don't know how the heck this happens, because we hired Jerry Nera. He was our attorney. We hired Kevin Grimes. They were our attorney. Kevin did a compliance course. So it gets really muckety-mucked up when you say, wait a minute, we hired Howard Kaplan. He was the attorney that told us how to do the 1099s. We hired the attorneys that have the great reputation. When I say we, not me, this is what they would say. We hired the attorneys we're supposed to hire, and yet we still are in the position that we're in, following our attorney's advice. Now, the attorneys are probably going to say, well, they didn't follow all our advice. That's usually the attorney speak. I don't know the truth because I wasn't there, but that's why this is like a really tragic situation. So I have firsthand knowledge of that. I can't speak anything about Telex Free, don't know anything about it. Can't tell you anything about Banner's Broker, don't know anything about it, but I can speak with some level of my perspective on whatever happened with Zeke Rewards. So there was a little bit of a mouthful over there, Scott.
Certainly most of what's out on the Internet right now is from the government's position, and there's always, as they say, there's at least three sides to every story. There's, the two sides that are arguing with each other, and then somewhere else there's the truth. And right. So far we've only seen mostly one side, and that's the government side. So I do think, the old saying, the jury is out. It really is. And I mean, until we can get into court and get the other side to put the facts on the table, all we're seeing is one side. So, I mean, I would agree. I wouldn't come to any conclusions. But there are some things in that document against Trudy that if assumed to be true, they're pretty damning. And so, but until there's a trial, we just don't know, because we know that the government has a position, and there's another position that's going to come up against them in trial, hopefully. And then somewhere there's got to be a judgment, either a judge or a jury has to make a decision on who's right or who's more right than the other side. And hopefully that's going to be based mainly on facts. That's the goal of a trial. Whether a trial achieves that or not, that's a whole different story. Because I can definitely attest to that with my experience being in a lawsuit with Amway. The facts really are secondary compared to some of the emotional stuff that Amway tried to bring into the trial. So it is pretty disgusting when you're on the other side and you hear the opposite side telling their side of the story, and it's nowhere near the facts.
Right. Well, the Zeke thing, and we'll explore this a little bit further on as we talk about what's going on with Jerry Nera, a little bit later on in this radio show. But it's kind of interesting to see how these things develop and how easy it is for people that don't know everything to form conclusions based on whatever they're reading and really come to the wrong conclusion. So let's kind of go a little bit further down. There's a pretty well-known and somewhat well-respected gentleman. His name is Jerry Nera, and Jerry Nera's partner is called Richard Walk, and Jerry Nera was the gentleman that was on the Amway case. So part of Jerry's claim to fame was he was part of the Amway case when they actually fought the government relative to whether MLM was a legitimate business model or not. So there are some really great things that Jerry Nera and a team of other attorneys did. So Jerry comes with this wonderful, if you will, example of how he's done some really great things. Now, he's taken on some questionable clients. And we just said a little bit earlier, unless we know all the variables, any decisions or any conclusions we're drawing are probably wrong. So we don't know everything that Jerry's done. We don't know everything that Jerry's ever told his customers. We don't know if his customers ever followed everything that Jerry did. So Jerry's being painted into the corner of being like a bad lawyer. I don't think that's true. I think Jerry Nera was a good lawyer. Matter of fact, I was against Jerry Nera when we sued, we meaning myself and some of our partners with Smart Networker, Kevin Lehman over in ProStep for wrongful termination. And by the way, we won. And I have a check from Jerry Nera for what I was supposed to get from Kevin Lehman based on us winning our wrongful termination. So I got some, if you will, like Rocky stuff going on. We're battling each other kind of like across from the table. So I have a huge level of respect for Jerry Nera. But what happened with Jerry Nera? Now I can't really say, wow, Jerry, that telex free thing, like wow, I really don't know anything about that one. You'd have some splaining to do about the telex free thing, because that one, like whoa, like I don't know. I'd like to hear your version of this thing, and I think he's going to get pummeled with that as well. But what happened just recently is the receiver put the squeeze on Kevin Grimes and put the squeeze on Jerry Nera for whatever money Zeke paid plus $100 million in damages. $100 million in damages. And the reason for the $100 million in damages is they said, you guys are so well respected, your perceived endorsement of this, opportunity, basically allowed them to make it bigger. You allowed them to perpetuate through your perceived level of authority and your perceived endorsement. Because of you, people were saying, well, Nera said it was okay and Kevin Grimes said it was okay, so we're going to sue you for $100 million because the company could have never gotten that big if it wasn't for you. So they did that to Kevin Grimes and they did that to Jerry Nera, and they settled with Kevin Grimes and Spencer Reese for something like $1.17 million, and they are going after Jerry Nera and Richard Walk, his partner, for I think $100,000 because they probably threw themselves on the ground, turned themselves upside down, and said, we really don't have a lot of money. And Kevin Grimes probably didn't throw himself on the ground and say, we don't have a lot of money. They said, here's our insurance policy. This is what our insurance covers. And the receiver probably said, okay, I'll take all of that plus more because I need an ounce of your flesh. So we got to prove a point. So we're going to make it hurt a little bit. So that's what they did with Kevin Grimes and Spencer Reese. And at least this is my perception, the way I read through the documentation. And probably Jerry Nera, because he had kind of retired, didn't have maybe as much insurance, so they settled with him for $100 million, made him sign something, and I don't know the words. We're not an attorney, of course, so I'm unfamiliar with some of the terms, but something correction of judgment, I think it was called, or
there's a
what of judgment.
Yeah, there's some kind of a fancy legal term, but basically the decision was he agreed that that the company was a Ponzi scheme, an illegal pyramid, and instead of owing the government $100 million, they settled for $100,000.
Right. Okay.
So he owes, or him and Richard together, I think, owe $100,000.
All right. So let's kind of play this out a little bit because you made a very fine statement a little bit earlier. We'll see what happens with the facts in court. So I want you to put yourself in Jerry Nera's position. So if you're listening and close your eyes, you are now Jerry Nera. Close your eyes, you're now Richard Walk. You're a little bit older, you're retired, your income probably slowed down because you're retired. Probably weren't making a ton of money towards the end, that's why you retired, because if you're making $1 bazillion, you keep making $1 bazillion until you die. So probably, slowing down in his career. And now all of a sudden you are faced with this $100 million lawsuit from a very powerful, very influential receiver. I got to take my hat off to it. Kenneth Bell is a good receiver. He is not, I don't necessarily like what he's doing because I think he's hurting a lot of wonderful people. He probably doesn't see it the same way I do, so that's where we disagree. But he's good at what he does. So if I was going to hire a receiver, he's already got a pretty proven track record for Kenneth Bell. Go get the money. Go get the money. So you get Kenneth Bell is really good at going and getting money coming after you. And then he says to you, okay, we're either going to do this or worse, and here's what I need you to do. Here's my list of demands. One of the demands is I need you to say it was a Ponzi and a pyramid scheme. Now open your eyes. Close your eyes. I don't care what you have to do. You're Jerry Nera. You get a guy coming after you for a $100 million judgment. Who knows where it's going after that? Because it could be more. It could be other things. Could take your house. Could take every car. Could take every asset you have. And then he gives you a list of demands. Which one of those won't you sign? Which one of those won't you sign? And the answer is, that list's pretty small. What do you want me to say? You write it, I'll sign it, is what probably will happen. Well, let me share with you something. So I'm going to tell you straight up front before it ever happens. Kenneth Bell ever shows up on my doorstep, says, Peter, we are suing you, because this could still happen, for $100 million because you brought them to the ANP, and because you had that power and you had that influence and you helped perpetuate this thing for $100 million. I hope he says at least $101 million for my ego. So $101 million, we think we're going to sue you for $101 million in damages, and he comes knocking on my door, shakes me upside down. I'll tell you, Kenneth, just tell me what you want me to sign. Just tell me what you want me to sign, because it's all yours. Right, wrong, just tell me what you want me to sign. I'm saying it here on a radio show. Tell me what you want me to sign. It hurts too much. You're going to take my house. You're taking my life. You already destroyed my reputation. What are you doing, Kenneth? What else do you want? What else do you want me to admit to? As long as I'm not going to jail, you're taking everything I got already. What else do you want me to sign? Now, that may not be the way Jerry Nera. So Jerry Nera might be jumping, like calling in on our radio show. That's not the way it worked at all. This is, I don't know, but I don't think we'll ever know. So when you say facts, Scott, remember you said, well, let the facts kind of play their way out. Here's what the receiver is going to say. The receiver is going to say to Mr. Paul Burks or Trudy Gilman's attorney or Trudy Gilman's judge, the lawyer already signed out or signed off that it was a Ponzi and a pyramid. The lawyer did. So I don't know if that's facts. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
If I was Burke's attorney, I would bring that to the attention of the judge and or the jury, whoever's, trying the case, and say, look, this guy was being sued for $100 million and he sued for $100,000 as long as he basically flipped. And so he's not really a reliable witness. That's what I would do as an opposing attorney and just make Nera look like, he rolled over. And so the facts I'm talking about bringing into court is, what really happened. Did Zeke Rewards have most of their profit coming from their auctions, or did they have most of their profit coming from people buying into the process? I know that the document, related to this case against Trudy, that the government makes the claim, and again, it's just their opinion, it's their side of the argument, that 98% of the money came from people buying in and 2% came from the actual auction process. So if those numbers are accurate, then they're in trouble. If they're not, they need to produce other factual evidence that shows, no, most of the money that was being made was coming from auctions. And then, the judge or jury needs to make a decision on, okay, who's got the right facts here? Who's got the documentation? Who's got the right analysis, and those kinds of things. Because I'll tell you right now, the most incompetent bunglers, in my opinion, is the government. And so, I look at these numbers and I go, well, that's one side of the story. What's the other side? Because I know that the government has proven themselves to be incompetent over and over and over again. And I'm talking about companies that I think should have been put out of business, like Amway. and instead Amway was able to keep going after the 1979 decision. I think for two main reasons. One was I don't believe the FTC insisted on Amway producing the customer receipts to show that there really were a lot of retail sales, and they didn't even touch the tool scam. I don't even know if they were aware of it back then. Of course, it's kind of an invisible thing. That's part of what makes it a scam, is it's hidden. And certainly back in the 70s, it was hidden better than it is now, thanks to the Internet. And so, when I say they're incompetent, I don't mean to say, they just have no idea what they're doing. But looking back on it particularly, there's just a lot of missing things here that if they had brought them into the case, I think the result would have been much different.
Right. So it's going to be one of those things that kind of plays out, and the reason why I have mixed feelings, of course, because some of these people I knew, I didn't know how they run their business. If you were to say to me, Peter, what percentage of the stuff were actually sold in the auctions versus not sold in the auction, I would say there's only one person that really knows that, and that would be Paul Burks. I don't think there's anybody else in the organization that really had a handle on that, and that was Paul Burks, because he did really run his own company. So I don't know. So the answer is I don't know. Were there retail sales? Were there retail offices? Why did they buy a 27,000 square foot warehouse to store products that they would be able to sell themselves? All of those types of things. So it goes back and forth, but nobody ever really knows the perception, or the percentage rather. And we're going to have to rely on whatever the government tells us is the case. So the Zeke thing is a really interesting phenomenon that is really having some major ramifications, because Kevin Grimes, a well-respected attorney, and I haven't spoken to Kevin since then, but I still would highly respect him. There's probably nothing that he would, nothing that I would learn that would have him fall from grace relative to those things, as far as him being an attorney. Jerry Nero is a fine man, good guy. He was an attorney. So, I don't know what the other companies did, what the other companies weren't supposed to do. I know that he signed off on Zeke a lot, so they bounced a lot of things off of their attorneys. I don't know which ones at any given time, when they did their videos, when they did their marketing materials, when they did a lot of that stuff. At least when I was around, I saw them getting an attorney blessing, or I saw them getting someone's approval on those types of things. So we'll see where it all shakes out. But unfortunately, the industry is being hurt. People's lives are being turned upside down. And now they're even going after Darryl Douglas. Now, this is another Zeke thing. Darryl Douglas, Double D, or DD as they sometimes would call him, was riding with Paul Burks since the very beginning. So they're long-term buddies. Him and Darryl did a whole bunch of things. Darryl had an extreme lapse of judgment when he decided that he was going to come up with his own penny auction. And I'm like, excuse me, are you kidding me? Like, you were a top producer, major money winner, and you're going to come up with another penny auction? And then, because stoned, stupid, overconfident, lack of knowledge, I still have no idea, he said things like, and we're going to market to the whole entire Zeke database because I built it. That was his words, not me. I built it. So, and this is all like there. So he just admitted, I'm using the Zeke database, I'm building a penny auction, and he wasn't complying to the receiver's request for his financial statements, depositions, and stuff like that. So I don't know, stoned, stupid, overly confident, ignorant, I'm not really sure which one, Double D. But now there's an arrest warrant out for Darryl Douglas. So who knows, and that's because he didn't show up for all of his court appearances that he previously agreed to show up with. So we might actually see a situation where someone goes to jail, because I don't think they just kind of like let you slide on those things. I think they kind of, when they do the arrest warrant, don't they kind of put you behind bars for a while?
They do. The judge has ordered the U.S. Marshal Service to go arrest him and put him in jail until he can produce the information the judge has asked for. He's asked him to turn over that Zeke Rewards database so that he doesn't have it anymore. He's also ordered him to turn over his financials and his records of the money he made from Zeke. So he's asked for that information, and he hasn't gotten it. And he hasn't even gotten this guy to show up in court like he ordered him to show up in court. And that's why the arrest warrant is out. So, yeah, he will be behind bars until he complies with those the judge's orders. Absolutely.
Now, I just want to share with us where we can be totally incompetent in whatever we're talking about. If the guy was in a major car accident, he's on his deathbed, he's got major surgery, can't fly, whatever, those might be excusable reasons why he might not be there. So we got to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe there's a valid excuse. So when I say stoned, stupid, overly competent, incompetent, ignorant, I don't know, the answer is I don't know. But all we do know is that if you don't respond or come up with a reasonable reason why, you're going to get arrest warrants. So for those people that think that sometimes they get away with these things, they don't. And there was another one, too, in the news under Patrick Pretty. He was the one that kind of broke it as far as for my vision. He talked about Banner's Broker. So Banner's Broker was a little bit of another thing that came out of Canada right around the time Zeke was doing some stuff, and they were doing some things with advertising, and pretty much not very good at camouflaging the idea that they were a real money game. The two people with Banner's Broker were just arrested as well. So there's some real poop hitting some fans with big fines, distributors contempt, distributor lawsuits, attorneys, vendors, a whole bunch of other things that are happening in the MLM space. And it hasn't been like this ever that I know of, Scott. I think this is, if we talk about like solar flares and eruptions happening, like it's really active. Like there's a lot of stuff happening right now. Vima, Herbalife, Zeke Rewards, Telex Free, Achieve Community, I think it was called. There's a whole bunch of them that it's really it's heating up. So anything else you want to add or mention?
Yeah, it's definitely heating up. In fact, there was a story, I'm trying to find it here. And just as a footnote, just as a couple of data points, I should say, personal data points. And this has been several years ago, but I used to know a guy in Amway who was one of these so-called independents. And these are people that don't buy into the tools. They just run their businesses, and they're mostly retail. And he went to a big meeting one time, and he's an Emerald. So he went to an Emerald and Above meeting at Amway headquarters, and he said, I knew we were a small minority, but he said, we're way less than 5% of Amway. Everyone else is doing the tools. So when you say, some people in Amway are doing it, I can be pretty sure it's at least 95%, because he was astonished. In fact, at the meeting, they were discussing a new bonus. Amway was coming up with this new bonus that if you did certain things at the very beginning, you sold so much product and sponsored so many people, that around the same time, you would get this extra bonus. And one of the women, Diamond and Above ladies, just stood up and she was indignant, saying there's no way you being Amway, should give that money to these people, because we, referring to the Diamonds and Above, we do all the work. And so that was just kind of an attitude check. If you want to know what people are really like, in real life, that's an example. You get all the sweet smiles when you're around the Diamonds and they're all happy and gleeful and positive, but it's what happens behind the curtain that really matters. And that was an interesting story. I also called Jerry Nera several years ago. This was way before all the Zeke stuff and all that. It was probably at least 5 to 7 years ago. And I was really interested in talking to him because he was a former Amway lawyer. And I asked him why he left. And he said, well, things just weren't good at Amway. There was a lot of bending the rules. There was a lot of things going on that just were not legitimate. They weren't legal. They weren't something he wanted to be around. And that's the story he gave me for leaving. And my question to him was, okay, you knew all that stuff was going around, and the end result is all these 99% of the IBOs are being ripped off. So how come you haven't spoken up about it? And if I could hear or see someone shrug their shoulders over the phone. That was the reaction I got. He just kind of blew it off, and I understand why. He's an MLM lawyer, and he makes his money, he makes his livelihood giving MLMs advice, and if he was part of the anti-MLM movement, he probably wouldn't have too many MLM customers asking for legal advice. So I understand why he was quiet, but I'm still frustrated that somebody that knows what's going on and is disgusted with it doesn't speak up. Now, he's in the vast, vast majority. Most former distributors don't speak up for a variety of reasons. But it's why this is only a two-person radio show. I wish more people would speak up because I think things would happen. But anyway, that's just a couple data points. I definitely was not impressed by him as far as standing up for principles. He was really standing up for his own income, and I understand you have to put food on the table, but why not just go practice some other kind of law? And so I have a different view of him and a different view of that outcome. I actually think he should be disbarred. Anyone that agrees that he was giving advice to a $100 million Ponzi pyramid scheme should not be practicing law.
I think the way they cover that in the description that the receiver wrote is based on his current knowledge. So it basically was written, if you read through it, look for the word current knowledge. So it basically says that, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase it, basically says, listen, when I was there, I didn't know. But now that you have all of these facts in front of me, based on my current knowledge, I will say it's a Ponzi and a pyramid scheme. So current knowledge is the key word there that allows him to change his mind and maybe not be disbarred, maybe disbarred because of incompetence. Now, remember, he's retired, so the disbarment thing doesn't really matter. Who knows what they're going to do with Richard Walk? I have limited experience with Richard Walk, although I've spoken to him several times, and he's actually helped a couple of companies that I know, and I consider him a good guy. Never ever saw any of these guys bend the rules. They told people it was right. They told people it was wrong. So I have a high level of respect for them as far as from my experiences. Now, again, I don't know whatever in the world he did with Telex Free. Telex Free would have been one I would have walked away from no matter how much money they gave me. And I think if you're an MLM attorney or if you're dealing with MLM attorneys, a lot of MLM attorneys are going to have to start making the value judgment of who am I going to represent? Because if they're going to keep going after the MLM attorney, if I were an MLM attorney, I'd really be wondering which clients I'm ever going to take and if I even, talk to some people. Some people might be just too hot to touch or help. So that will be kind of interesting for the Jeffrey Babners and the Michael Sheffields and the other people that are kind of left over, and the Kevin Thompsons of the world. It'd be kind of interesting to see who they're going to touch or who they won't. So, and what ramifications that's going to have in our industry. Well, Scott, we're down to a minute left, so I will let you wrap it up and say make sure you go check out his website. It's stoptheamwaytoolscam.wordpress.com. And, Scott, I'll give you 30 seconds. We can wrap it up.
Okay, well, thanks, Peter, and thanks again for doing this on a weekly basis. I do appreciate it. And there are some other things that we didn't have time to talk about. Maybe we can save those for next week, but there was some news from New York State as well as another lawsuit against Talk Fusion, so that'll just give some people something to look forward to for next Saturday.
More stuff for next Saturday. Great, perfect. Well, guys, thanks very much. We'll speak to you next time. Thanks for being here on Building Fortunes Radio.
You've been listening to Building Fortunes Radio on buildingfortunesradio.com. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check us out every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for the designated Building Fortunes Radio segment with Peter Mingils. Be sure to check out the buildingfortunesradio.com website for our featured segments. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. At Building Fortunes Radio, we wish you the success you deserve and are willing to work for. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world.